All right, so here we go. Welcome, Facebook community. I'm live streaming this right now to the Inforum Facebook page, so that those of you who could not join us today are able to hear the presentation. And we're so delighted because we have Inforum's President and CEO, Terry Barclay, presenting today. She's going to be talking about The Road to the Top is Not on the Map, her book, and the surprising leadership lessons learned from the 36 women featured in the book. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Terry Barclay.
Well, thank you so much, Brenda. And I just want to say how wonderful it is to be here with everyone today and to see your faces. What a treat that is. And as Brenda said earlier, to see your faces without masks on them because we're all in our own places and safe, but we can see the smiles and see the expressions. It makes my heart sing to be able to be with people. So thank you for that. And I really want to thank the Fab Five for their organization of this affinity group. You know, talk about leadership lessons. We have a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn from them. So I'm just really excited to be here to talk about the book, The Road to the Top is Not on the Map, Conversations with Top Women in the Automotive Industry. I never, if you had told me that I would be part of getting a book published, you know, years ago, I would have just really thought you were crazy. So this has been just an amazing experience. And so what I thought I'd do is just share a little bit about what the process was around the book, but then to really focus in on what were the top lessons from it, sort of, I guess, to give you sort of a Cliff Notes version, if you will. So this book came about because of the network. And we talk all the time at Inforum about the power of networks. The thing that I find really amazing is we often begin to build a network with an end in mind, and then all these wonderful serendipitous things happen when you have that network in place. And this book is completely the result of having a network in place. So the Society of Automotive Engineers International, SAE International, has a book publishing division. And usually they focus, as one might imagine, on very technical engineering sorts of texts. But I think that there's a wonderful woman who leads that division for SAE. And I think she was seeing interest on the part of the thousands of SAE members around the world in this topic of leadership and leadership of women in the industry. Because, you know, let's face it, we still have more work to do to get more women in leadership roles in the automotive industry. And so they reached out to one of their board members, Carla Bello, who is the CEO of the Center for Automotive Research, and asked for her help on the book. And Carla, being a wonderful supporter of other women and also being a very busy person, kind of looked at the prospect of doing the book and said, there's no way I have time to do this. I need a partner. So she reached out to me and asked if I would help. And I tend to say yes more than I say no, and then worry about what I got myself into. But this just seemed like too good of an opportunity to pass up. So what we decided to do was we wanted to make the women in the industry the stars and the focus of this effort. So and we also know how busy they are. So we tried to set this up to make it as easy as possible for everyone involved, including ourselves. So what we did was we interviewed 36 women in the industry, 37 really, but 36 women in the industry. And to make it simple, we wanted to get at the leadership lessons that they've learned, because when you look at these women, their collective career experience is just amazing. And there's so much for all of us, no matter our walk of life, whether we're in the auto industry or not, is in many ways irrelevant. You know, it's all about how do you manage to move successfully through your life, through your work, through the setbacks that you inevitably experience. If you work for any period of time at all, there's going to be bumps in the road. And you know, so what have they learned in their journeys? So what we did was we created interview questions in 6 different categories, and I'll tell you about those categories in a minute. And there were multiple questions within the categories, so we were able to send these questions out to each one of the women. It was really my job and Carla's to convince people that they should participate in this project. And I've got to tell you, I was nervous about that, just because I know how busy people are. And also, when you're doing something very public, you're actually publishing a book. You know, there can be concern. You know, there's kind of a balancing act between being candid and being careful, right, about what you say. I have to tell you, I was just blown away by, there was not a single person that we asked who said no. Sometimes it took us a little bit of effort to get to the yes, because, things had to be thought about and vetted. But there wasn't a single person who said no. And the candor and the thoughtfulness of the women who participated was just amazing. So let me tell you about the 6 categories, and you can tell me. I'm really curious whether you think we found the right ones or not. So here are the categories: education and lifelong learning, work-life integration, mentor and sponsor relationships, taking charge of your career path, resilience, my personal favorite, and personal satisfaction. And that last one was important because oftentimes we focus on the challenges and the mountains to be climbed and the bumps along the way, and we forget to talk about the joy and the excitement that you can get from facing a challenge successfully, with all its pain and glory. So those were the 6 categories, and as I said, we had sets of questions within those categories so that people could pick what they felt comfortable talking about. So here's the top 10 lessons learned, and I just want to do a check on, good, because I want to have time for questions or comments. I just wanted to do a check on time here. And I would guess, first of all, the overall takeaway that I had from hearing everyone's stories was how there is no one right path. I think that we tend to think that it's a ladder. It's not a, sort of a lattice, as we talk about, and that we think that there's, especially in large companies like automotive manufacturers and suppliers, we tend to think that there's one right way to do it. And just the sheer diversity of career paths for these women was really eye-opening, and encouraging for those of us who maybe haven't been on one ladder up. So that was one of the overall takeaways. But here are the top 10. So I've already really talked about the first one, that progress doesn't always travel in a straight line. And actually, Mary Barra talked about this in her introductory quote for the book. She talked about how valuable it is to that broad set of skills and perspectives from moving into very different areas and fields throughout your career just makes you more valuable the more that you progress in your work and at a company. So that, I would say that progress doesn't travel in a straight line is the first takeaway. Secondly, the importance of owning our own careers. I know that certainly in my career early on, I was just happy to be working and I didn't think much about my career. I worked hard. Um, I enjoyed what I did. I kept looking for challenges, but I didn't really think about how to own my career. And you know, at the end of the day, no one's going to care about your career as much as you do. And so you really are in a powerful position to make choices. It doesn't always feel that way, but there's sort of a story after story in this book about different ways that these women took charge of their own careers and made the choices that were right for them. And I would say that what I saw is when they did that, when they had the courage to do that, that actually was when they made the most progress. And sometimes that can be hard to do. You know, you are focused in on making the right choices, whether those make sense for you or not. It's because maybe someone's told you or you've observed that there's a right way to do things. But you've got to marry that with who you are and what makes you tick in order to really get the power from that. The third lesson from these incredible women, and this is actually it's actually my favorite personally, is the power of beliefs and self-awareness in moving us forward, and the power of beliefs in self and self-awareness in being resilient through setbacks. You know, there's a quote that people use all the time: you can't change what happens, but you can, the only thing you can control is your reaction to that. That was a theme that came through time and time again, and that how core it is to being resilient. That when you hit a speed bump, you have to go through the process of you have to go through the process when you hit the speed bump, but that there's so much value in coming to the point when you can reframe that. And you can oftentimes, you can reframe it as an opportunity. It doesn't feel like that or seem like that in the beginning stages. But also people saw some of those speed bumps as ways of getting back to being true to themselves and what was most important to them. And again, when people did that, the theme often is that opportunity arises when you have done the work of being self-aware enough to know what makes you tick and to get courageous about putting that out there a little bit more. So the fourth lesson, relationships, and again, this is one of my favorites because of what we do at Inforum, but relationships and a diverse network, not just technical skills, are the bedrock of long-term career success. Again, there's stories after stories from each one of these women about how it was the power of their relationships that propelled them forward. And that I had a couple of them confide that if they had a do-over, it would be to understand that earlier in their careers, that they think they could have gone even farther if they had realized early on that technical skills are table stakes. They are very important. They are the price of entry. You have to be good at what you do. But what will really propel you forward are those relationships in a diverse network. So I talked about relationships being the reason this book happened. And this is just a small thing. There's so many great stories about how unexpected career opportunities arose because of those relationships that they had built, and that they'd wish they'd emphasized that sooner. The fifth lesson from the book, and if I know we have moms on this call, but this was a really powerful theme in the book, because these are all women at the top of their game. Don't be afraid to ask. And this most often came up in conjunction with the issues of childcare and raising, being involved with a family and work-life balance. There were women who talked about being literally at the end of their rope, that they felt so uncomfortable asking for what they needed, for the support they needed or the flexibility that they needed. They felt that it would not be well received, given the culture at some of their companies. And it was only when they reached their breaking point, really, where they thought, I've got to make this change or I'm going to have to quit my job, that they got the courage to go in and talk to their boss or the people they needed to talk to and say, look, it's not working. This is what I need. And it and to a person, they said the reactions were positive, and they were then kicking themselves that they went through that period of suffering where it was just too hard to figure out, but that their companies and their bosses were supportive. So they just needed to ask for what they wanted, and they needed to, think it through and have the solution. But it was amazing to me to see and really moved me to see the struggle that people had with this particular issue, because these are powerful, successful women who don't have any problem going out in their jobs and making things happen. But when it came to making things happen on that personal level, it took an extra level of courage. The sixth theme that emerged from the interviews were the importance of being active in helping women on the way up, helping other women on the way up. These women take great pride in the fact that they do that. They find meaning in doing that. And they feel that they're making an important difference for their companies, and certainly an important difference for other women. But I would argue that they're also just helping raise all boats by doing this, because they're demonstrating just the support, the teamwork that we know we do as women, and sort of maybe shattering some of the stereotypes in the process that help raise opportunities for all women. So that was a theme that emerged. And maybe it was just that, as I said, everyone we asked to be part of this said yes. And so maybe it was a self-selected group that feels really strongly about doing whatever they can to make the path easier for the next generation. But I don't think so. I think that this willingness to be able to help others is something that makes you successful as a leader. The seventh lesson came through loud and clear. It's a little kind of related to the other ones. Don't be so hard on yourself. One of my favorite quotes from the interviews is from one of the executives, Carrie Ewell, who at the time was at Magna. Resilient leaders give themselves grace and they give others grace. Wow, I think so many of us, that one sticks with me because we are kind and supportive of others, but good grief, our inner self-talk sometimes can be pretty harsh. And so I love the idea of giving yourself grace and giving others grace. The 8th theme was the whole sponsor and mentor piece, which is very much related to relationships. I think you guys know about that. We don't need to belabor that point, but that yeah, and I think everyone knows the difference between a sponsor and a mentor, and you probably know the data that shows that women are over mentored and under sponsored. And the difference being that sponsors are the people who speak out on your behalf when you're not in the room. They're the people who are advocating for your advancement in those important talent management meetings and other settings where the future trajectory of careers are being set. And by the way, you can have sponsors and you don't have to just be in a large company to have a sponsor. I had early in my career, I was fortunate. I was at a very small nonprofit, and one of my board members was very much a sponsor for me. I remember him inviting me to lunch one day with someone that I didn't, he just said, I just want you to meet this person. And I just, okay, I didn't know why exactly I was going, but it turned out that person was the chair of the selection committee for a leadership program that was very hard to get into. And so we just had a normal lunch. I had no idea really why we were having lunch. And it turned out that this gentleman on my board, who was a sponsor for me, was teeing me up to be selected for the program. Those are the kinds of things that sponsors can do for you, and you can find them whether you're on your own or in a large company or a small company. The ninth lesson is risk-taking. All of these women took significant risks. Most times they worked out, sometimes they didn't. That's where the resilience part comes in. But getting more comfortable with putting yourself out there and taking those risks was a common theme in the book. And well, I think enough said. And I would say the 10th observation, this is not really a leadership lesson from the book, but I find it really interesting. So this book was officially published on October 1st of 2019. We sent it to the editing and printing process really in April of that year. So you know the lead times required for this. A very high percentage of the women in this book have already changed jobs, and some of them have changed companies. So I find it really interesting that this is a group that continues to be on the move, even though they've achieved such great success, and you could argue that it's time for their victory lap year, as they say. But they're continuing to push the envelope, grow, and find new venues where they can make a difference. So I find that to be interesting. So anyway, those are the things that I observed, and gosh, I need to look if there are any questions.
I'm
if
going to
there's
unmute myself here and we'll pull us back up into grid view. At this point, I'm going to stop the Facebook Live. So thank you on the community for joining.